Right, hello everybody. My name is Alex. I'm also a student at UNISA, second year. So while I'm studying, I'm teaching just to keep myself focused. I hope it helps you as much as it helps me. If it does, please remember to click like, share, and subscribe. All right, so we're looking at chapter 2, physical development and sexuality. Starting with physical development, the biological aspects of physical development, okay? Here they list the senses, the central nervous system, especially the brain, and the endocrine glands. We peak physically between the ages of 20 and 30 and decline slowly thereafter, which becomes noticeable from about the age of 40 onwards. Biological theories of aging. Why and how do we age, and is there anything we can do about it? There doesn't seem to be much we can do overall, but for each of us, there's a lot that we can do. Okay, let's go through some aging theories. First one, programmed aging theories. So basically, we evolutionarily programmed to age in order to prevent overpopulation and make space for younger generations so that we can continue to refresh the species. Then it would be built into the genetic programming of the cells, causing eventual infertility, hormonal changes, and loss of neurons, amongst other declines. Okay, one sort of sub-theory of this theory, it's called the genetic programming theory. Each cell has a body clock, so there's a genetic program telling you to age. This is done through telomeres. At the end of each chromosome, you get these little fragments called telomeres, which get shorter and shorter and shorter over time. And they can divide about 50 times and then they're finished. They're too short, they've got no more of their enzyme, telomerase, and that's it. The cell can't divide and reproduce and replace itself anymore. Okay, so something that argues in favor of this theory is that cancer cells are immortal. Their telomeres don't work, so they tend to just keep dividing and dividing and dividing and lasting forever. But against this theory, even cells that are continuing to divide do deteriorate over time. So it can't be all explained by telomeres and cell division. Okay, another theory of aging, the random error theory. There's also quite good evidence for this one. Wear and tear happens. Free radicals damage cells and interfere with functioning, kind of at random. Proteins degenerate over time, and so do tissues. So this is really sometimes called the wear and tear theory. So like old shoes or machines, bodies wear out. Usage and random events cause wear and tear. And stresses such as radiation and poor diet do not help. Okay, we're worn out by use. For example, you use your hands a lot, you get osteoarthritis in the hands. But critics say, if this was true, exercise would age us faster. And also, how do we know that wear and tear isn't the result, not the cause of aging? Okay. Right, there's a 1-minute video on free radicals. It's very nice. Okay, free radical theory. Atoms with missing electrons are called free radicals. So they grab another electron from another atom, and when they do that, they damage whatever that atom is in. So they damage cell membranes, DNA, and other structures. Free radicals are associated with dementia, heart disease, cancer, cataracts, and aging spots on the skin. When free radicals have damaged enough cells in an organism, it ages and eventually dies. The cross-linking theory. With age, tissues lose elasticity and become harder and tougher. This makes them less functional. Proteins cross-link, okay, form collagen and become more rigid. Muscles and arteries and tissues become less effective, metabolic processes are blocked, and nutrients can't be as well absorbed. We still don't really know enough about this theory and cannot actually prove that it is a result of aging or a cause of aging. It's not yet been proven. It's just an idea at this point, a hypothesis. Okay, it's a very cool video. Each theory of aging in one sentence with a soundtrack that actually applies. Very nice. And I love the idea of the elastic. It's her idea, not mine. Amazing. Okay, so the conclusion of all that is that biological aging is probably the result of many different processes in combination, okay, which is quoted differently in the textbook, but the same idea. All right, some physical changes that happen as you age. The brain starts shrinking and losing neurons. It loses blood flow. It continues to make new neurons. It's not that the brain doesn't make new neurons, but it loses more than it makes. Not only that, but the neurons themselves and the neurotransmitters slow down over time. So older people lose reaction time, vocabulary, learning, and memory ability. We're going to do a lot of this later in the textbook, I think. The more you use the brain, the better you retain cognitive ability. So use it or lose it. The senses. Vision starts getting worse in middle age. The lens becomes less able to focus. It becomes more rigid. The little things that hold in place get less good. It thickens. So most people become farsighted and need glasses to read. In other words, they're reading like with their at arm's length, right? You also can't adapt to changes between light and dark as easily, which makes driving at night more difficult. Okay, as people age, they get more glaucoma, the fluid builds up pressure in the eye, and cataracts, that blue look, the lens gets opaque. Okay. Elderly people also lose some peripheral depth and color vision, as well as light adaptation and increased sensitivity to glare. So your eyes start going downhill. Hearing. Over time, you lose hearing, especially of the high notes. It's worst for elderly men. It's associated with increased risk of dementia, can be associated with depression, lower self-esteem, and lower quality of life because you can't hear people, you can't communicate. Okay, taste, smell, and touch. Taste and smell go down. People can accidentally eat things that are off. And you also can't tolerate heat and cold. So you're actually more sensitive to heat and cold because your body can't handle them like it used to. Muscle strength. Okay, muscle strength does start declining after the age of 30, and so does reaction speed. So that an elderly person can often fall more easily. But you can stay strong and fit if you keep exercising. You really can. You're going to lose some muscle, but actually there are many fit elderly people that are much stronger than a youngster who doesn't do any exercise. Same goes for stamina. You get old people running marathons, you know, people who can't run 10 meters. Okay, appearance. All right, as people's appearances change, it can be a lot to handle, especially those people who have their identity wrapped up in their appearances. In mass media, we're very wrapped up in our appearance because we're constantly comparing ourselves to the most beautiful people in the world, okay, because that's who we see. Remember the concept of the ageless self? People still feel young on the inside and then are surprised by their real appearance. So they look at the mirror and go, who's that? It's very strange. Okay, right, weight and height. Okay, both men and women lose height as they age. By the age of 70, they've lost, for men, 3 centimeters, and for women, 5. Some of this is due to osteoporosis and a weakening of the bones. Okay, also in middle age, people get fatter, but then they often lose weight again when they get older than middle age and older in late adulthood. Okay, internal organs. Right, now this is just some of the information. There's a lot more. The heart atrophies. He also loses flexibility. It brings blood into the heart and out of the heart. The arteries harden, the heart becomes less efficient. Lungs lose elasticity. The immune system takes a big knock. The bladder holds about half as much as it used to. Okay. Right. Illness. Health deteriorates from about the age of 45. So just about every illness people are more prone to as they get older. Poverty is a major factor in illness and mortality rates. Because obviously diet, stress, lifestyle all make a huge difference to a person's well-being. And when people are poor, they're unable to mitigate the stresses and enhance the benefits. They don't get what people who have enough money to live well do get. Okay, so the stats change every few years as to the major causes of death in South Africa. So there's no point worrying about which one is number 1 and number 2, because it changes all the time, especially with COVID. Okay, so we've got HIV/AIDS. Okay, things about that. Okay, there's a very high suicide rate amongst people suffering from it. A lot of depression, huge financial challenges. It's a disease of younger people, but then when the youngsters who are earning and supporting the whole family get it, everybody in the family suffers, old to young. There's an enormous social stigma. It's quite a lonely and difficult disease to have. Even with the antiretrovirals, which we have now, which actually you could actually see a difference in the mortality rate in South Africa, where it went down as ARVs were given out. Okay. Ischemic heart disease, lack of blood and oxygen rushing to the heart. So the heart isn't getting what it needs to be okay. Stroke, blocking of the blood flow into the brain, either through a clot or through an aneurysm where it breaks, okay? High blood pressure, hypertension, the arteries conflict, and things don't go through as well, so the pressure builds up in the bloodstream. So those 3 are all actually cardiovascular. Then you also have cancer, which goes up as people get older, maybe because of free radicals, TB, which is a major problem in South Africa, and diabetes, also a major problem and associated with cardiovascular. Okay, here are some questions from an old assignment. All right, so you can look at that and guess. You can see that a lot of these have to do with the sexuality ones. Okay, gives us an idea of what we need to know. Okay, this is important. The climacteric period and menopause. The climacteric is a fancy word for perimenopause, which is the time before proper menopause in women. It happens in middle-aged women. Ovulation stops, hormones change, menstrual patterns change, and sexual responses change. But it's before they actually become infertile. Actually, well, ovulation slows to stops. Menopause is the actual end of fertility and the end of menstruation, okay? Estrogen and progesterone go down, and then, because it's regulated in the pituitary gland, the body starts producing lots of the hormones that tell the body to make estrogen and progesterone. So it produces lots of follicle-stimulating hormone and lots of luteinizing hormone. And so that's what gives you the symptoms. The hot flushes, the sweating, the lower libido, anxiety, emotional instability, also called lability, depression, insomnia, irritability. Okay. In some ways, this is universal. In some ways, there's different cultural interpretations because different people go through it differently. Some people have a terrible time. Others hardly notice it. Some people find it very stressful. Other people feel that they've been empowered to come into their power at that age because it's respected as part of their culture. Okay. Male menopause. The correct phrase is male andropause because menopause has got to do with menstruation and andropause to do with androgens such as testosterone, male hormones. Men remain fertile until death, although the quality of their sperm does go down, but they have lower testosterone. So that drop in testosterone can cause very similar symptoms: insomnia, anxiety, lower libido, irritability, and memory problems. Well, obviously they don't get hot flashes, right? It also correlates to the midlife crisis, which has massive changes in your life. Men are often valued according to their ability to work and produce. So when they reach this age, there's big changes in terms of their identity, which can be quite stressful and unpleasant to go through. Okay. Sexuality. So adolescents experience puberty, but they're too egocentric. They haven't created themselves yet, so they don't form deep relationships at this age. It's quite shallow. It's all about crushes. Young adults are able to have a mature adult sexual relationship. In other words, they can have emotional intimacy, caring, and mutual respect. But it's quite hard to research sexuality because, number one, people don't like sharing the details because it's private. So the people that don't mind sharing the details get overrepresented, and you think everyone's totally wild and uninhibited because those are the people that are talking and speaking up. Okay, people also aren't honest. Even if they participate in research, they say what they think the researcher will approve of. Okay, and they keep secrets. Sexual behavior is strongly influenced by different cultures and norms. So you research this bunch, but it doesn't apply elsewhere, all right? And statistical research obscures people's behavior that is outside the average, okay? And that means you can't know properly about it. So international research, the first one was the Kinsey report, right back in the 1940s and 50s. But number one, it's out of date. Two, the methodology is really suspect. And apparently some of it may even have been made up a bit. But it did open the door to research into an area that was previously taboo. University of Chicago study in 1994 did a representative sample of American individuals and was able to divide people into three groups of sexual activity. The bunnies, who have sex at least 2 times a week, a third of people. The average, have sex a few times a month. And the not very much at all, who have sex a few times per year or not at all. So it's 1/3 week, 1/3 month, 1/3 year. Married people have the most sex and the best quality sex, with the most orgasms and the best intimacy. Adultery is much less common than people thought. It seems like 3/4 of men are faithful and 85% of women, with only a 10% difference. 95% of participants in the survey said they preferred vaginal sex to other sexual activities. 54% of men think about sex at least once a day, and this is a big difference. 76% of women think about sex only a few times per week or month. And obviously you're going to have the outliers, people who never think about sex, people who are completely sex crazed. All right. So South African research, you can't generalize. You need proper South African data to know what is going on. Sexual behavior is not universal. Plus, there's massive differences amongst the different cultures within South Africa and subcultures. We are very multicultural and very hard to extrapolate from. So, 2002, the Pfizer Global Study included 1,000 South Africans. Of the South Africans aged 40 to 80, 30% English, 30% Afrikaans, 20% Zulu, 10% other African. Okay, so it's too small a sample to really know what's going on, but anyway. Sex for South Africans seems more important than the global average, but also they report more sexual difficulties. All right. Okay, the Ipsos Markino study, but later looks at how AIDS, HIV has changed South Africa's sexual attitudes and behavior, and found that people didn't change their behavior, despite the ABC major government campaigns, very expensive. In fact, risky behavior increased over time instead. There was the Health 24 study. Then there was some nice research on university students, which I think they might ask about. All right. So we get historically Black university. I'm very curious to know which one. The men seem to have their first experiences quite young, at 16, women at 17. A lot of people felt pressurized to have sex, more women than men, which tells you who's pressurizing them and how, right? Then men had 10 and women had 3.5 partners. These are students, right? So they're really, they're quite young when they're answering these questions. Many had concurrent, a spare wheel, right? Concurrent sexual relationships outside their main partnership. And only 50% of men used a condom. Most students weren't worried about getting HIV. Could have been just the way it was asked. Okay. UWC 2005, very small sample, more women than men. So 153 Black, colored, and Indian students. Do you see the problem? Each of those can be subdivided into different groups, as you know. In South Africa, those are many, it's not just 3 groups, that's many. Okay. More than half disapproved of premarital sex, and just over half had had sex. Peer pressure to have sex had affected about 20% of students, all right? Most felt that condoms should be used. You can see I haven't edited yet. There were more women than men. Okay, so that may be why this results were skewed. Okay, Forte, 1995, looked into the effects of religiosity. So it looked at students with strong religious beliefs. This was done by Nicholas. About 2,000 students. They tended to have more fantasies and less sex than students with less religiosity, which makes sense. The two are correlated, I'm sure. But they were more disapproving of sexual activities, which is also pretty self-evident, I think. Okay, sexual behavior patterns in adulthood. People are more permissive and have more unmarried sex than in the past decades, especially women. So that old double standards have fallen away of, men can sow their wild oats, but women must be chaste. Older people may be less sexually active, more intimate as time goes by, but it's a myth that people's sexuality disappears as they get old. Sometimes it's more problematic and less frequent, but this also varies from person to person. There's physical difficulties that come into play as people get older. Okay. Hysterectomies are removal of the uterus and sometimes the ovaries. Doesn't mean that people lose the ability to have sex or the desire. When people lose their ovaries, they need hormones to keep everything ticking along, okay? So if there's no hormones, there's no sexual desire. But if people are getting hormones, then sexual desire is not necessarily negatively affected. Okay. Sexual orientation, gay, straight, or bi. Okay, so there's several myths about homosexuality. One of them is that only humans are homosexual. This is not true. There's about 1,500 species in which homosexual behavior has been recorded. Number 2, it's easy to see who is homosexual. This is not true. It's not true that men are effeminate and women are butch. This may be so, but you can't tell, okay? It's a spectrum. In other words, it's not like black and white, cut and dried. It's a continuum between these different categories, but usually we divide people into heterosexual, homosexual, and bisexual for orientation. It's multifactorial, a mix of nature and nurture. It's not a mental disorder. Conversion therapy doesn't seem to be safe or effective. It leads to a very high suicide rate and immense unhappiness. Sexual orientation is best regarded as a human right and as a differentiation between people, like race and gender and class and culture. Just take people as they are, and that's the best way to deal with them. Okay. And that is the end of the chapter. And you can answer these 16 questions. They're very useful. Okay, so I hope that helped. Don't forget to click like, share, and subscribe. Use the comments section as you wish, and we'll continue with chapter 3 when I've read it. Okay.